Prices have rocketed past $110 per barrel on Monday, marking the sharpest single-day surge exceeding 30% since 2022. The spike was fueled by intensifying US-Israel war against Iran that has completely halted maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz and triggered production cuts by major producers including Iraq and Kuwait. Brent crude rose more than 15% to trade between $107 and $108, while US benchmark West Texas Intermediate climbed to comparable levels above $107. Markets are gripped by fears of sustained supply disruptions that could remove millions of barrels per day from global availability, with analysts warning of further volatility if the conflict escalates. And now to give you a rounded perspective on this, I'm joined by Mr. Atul Aneja, Foreign Affairs expert. Good afternoon, Mr. Aneja. Thank you so much for joining us at this afternoon broadcast. Well, Dr. S. Jaishankar today addressed on the most important issue and assured that the steps being taken by the government of India for the safety of Indians are closely also being monitored under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. How do you assess the statement delivered at both the houses of the parliament in light of the current geopolitical situation? Mr. Aneja.
Deepika, there were three pillars to the External Affairs Minister's address. The first, of course, and I think that was the focus, which was the safety and security of Indian nationals who reside in the Gulf countries and who are directly or indirectly impacted by the war which is taking place between Israel and US on one side and Iran on the other. There are a very large number of Indian nationals there, and estimates go to around 90 lakhs, or about 9 million people residing in that place, in that area. So what Dr. Jaishankar did say elaborately was some of the first of all, the ground situation, that how many of them have already moved away from the eye of the storm, to say, and moved by road to Saudi Arabia or to Qatar, and even from Bahrain. Bahrain and Saudi Arabia are connected by a causeway, and moved and are taking their own steps to move out. Also, our Indian nationals in Iran have been advised to move from Tehran to other locations. And I'm sure there are other contingency plans which are in place just in case the situation worsens and there's a need for more forceful steps. He also mentioned about the new flights which are being organized for evacuation as and when they arrive. So that was one very important, the human side of it and the prime responsibility of the government, which is safety and security of our nationals. The second point I thought was about energy security, where External Affairs Minister reassured the House that both houses that India is taking all precautions to make sure that there is no energy crisis which takes place because of this closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the ancillary kind of activities which are going on affecting countries in other oil producers in that region. So that was the second part. And I think third one, which is I think extremely important, is that India wants this conflict to be resolved through dialogue and diplomacy, and since that is really the root cause, the conflict is the root cause of all the crises on the humanitarian and the energy security and food security end. So the focus is on resolving this conflict, or helping to resolve this conflict through dialogue. That's the advice, and I'm sure we can expect more to come, because India has 360-degree relations with all the parties involved in this conflict, to play a role and to do our bit to make sure that this conflict comes to an end as soon as possible.
Now, as you mentioned, he also mentioned about India's energy requirements and said that it is on the top priority of India's diplomacy. Having given the tense situation outside India, but instilling confidence inside India, how will it help in stabilizing the Indian market specifically?
We'll see, Deepika, how the Indian markets respond to this. The statement from the government is obviously important, and the markets would factor that in. So I would assume that it would have a calming effect on the markets. What EM's reassurances today, So that would help a bit. And I think we may need to go into more specifics because there is other sources of energy. For example, Russia is not impacted by this war, so obviously we have a channel with Russia, and the route which that oil supplies take place is through Far East Russia, which is Vladivostok, and then essentially come to the Bay of Bengal sides towards Chennai. So we have that particular supply line still open, which is not affected by the Strait of Hormuz. So I suspect that there's so much which the EM can say in a session, but these will be aspects which the markets would also factor in and give a fuller picture and a bigger picture of our contingency plans to ward off this crisis, because that's a very important channel which remains open. And we have a very good relationship with Russia, and we've been buying Russian oil. So perhaps that would be one area or one geography through which we would accelerate our sourcing.
Yes.
Plus, we have also strategic reserves, Deepika. We have about, it used to be about 20 days earlier. I'm sure it has increased by now. We huge vaults in which we store reserves of oil for contingency use. So those are intact. So, and finally, I don't think this war can last for so long because impacting too many people, too many countries. There's an energy crisis, there's a food crisis. So, unlike, let's say, the Ukraine conflict, or let's say what used to happen, the Vietnam conflict, those could go on and not impact the whole globe, But this one is impacting lives. And there are issues like water, food, and oil. So I think the pressures are going to come very strongly to have this under control as soon as possible. So that's what we need to keep in mind.
Let's also talk about the latest developments in Iran. Mojtaba Khamenei, son of Ali Khamenei, has been selected as Iran's new supreme leader. But US is not very happy with this, and there are reactions from Israel also. How well can Mojtaba handle this situation, if at all dialogue is their priority?
No, I think right now, I don't think we are anywhere near a dialogue. The war is escalating right now. I saw an interview of Foreign Minister Aragchi today saying that dialogue is fine, but unless we can't go for a ceasefire unless Iran gets some very specific assurances of a permanent end to this situation. So I think dialogue is still far away. As far as the election of Mojtaba Khamenei is concerned, the Iranians have their own system, Deepika, because I've been in that area for a long time. It's a system, there's an assembly of experts, and this assembly of experts is not just put from the top. It is elected by the panel who can stand for election is vetted by something called a guardian council inside the Majlis, which is the Iranian parliament. And they elect these 88 people. And this particular assembly of experts has a right to elect a supreme leader and also the right to remove a supreme leader. So, I think, we're going too much by one-sided media reports that as if it's a complete authoritarian system which functions. There was a gentleman called Montezeri, Ayatollah Montezeri, who went into great depth in devising the Iranian system. And I would say it's a democratic system with caveats, and which functions, which has a logic of its own.
Now, G7, amidst all this, is also set to discuss joint release of emergency oil reserves. How much will that help?
Well, it all depends on how long this war lasts, Deepika. These things help a day, a month, but if this is going to prolong for longer time, the greater will be the crisis. And so it can help, it will help the emergency reserves, but it will be more helpful if this war, let's say, ends in the next 15 days. I mean, that should work. But if it goes beyond that, then I think this will be too less, introduction in the market, emergency reserves. So the crisis won't go away. And coupled with that, Deepika, if I may, can also be a water crisis. You see, there is a water pipeline of 500 kilometers which goes from the Persian Gulf to Riyadh, for example, which is in the missile range. And there is a Chesham Island of Iran, which also has a desalinization plant, which can be hit. So, this can quickly get into beyond energy, beyond oil, it can get into water. And thirdly, if you take the Gulf countries, they're not very large countries, they're food dependent, fresh vegetables and your fruits and wheat even. I mean, they don't grow much food of their own because it's a desert zone. So if this prolongs and the flights get disrupted, shipping gets disrupted, then there is not just an energy crisis, but there is a food crisis coming in and there is a water crisis which can come in. I don't want to sound alarmist. I'm just saying that there are possible verticals which can get impacted. So, and that's why there's an urgency to do whatever we can to get this over with quickly with whatever means we have, because we are getting impacted. We don't not only oil, Deepika, but our people. So India is deeply invested in making sure through whatever channels we can to end this war to the extent we can help. I think that is something which would be logical to expect. And I'm sure we are addressing this issue of doing whatever we can to terminate this.
And that's all the more reason that dialogue and diplomacy is always important, as always reiterated by the Indian government. Thank you so much, Mr. Atul Aneja, for joining us and getting us a very important analysis of the ongoing situation there in West Asia. And